When did you realize your friends were actually fake friends? Back in my first year of college, I used to have a group of friends, like 7 dudes with me included. We always hang out together and we're used to have this group chat where we discuss about anything from class subjects to random things. After a year, I noticed that one of the guys, let's just call him Randy, keeps getting excluded, not invited, informed to group hangout while they're talking smack behind his back. And the unofficial leader of the group actually made a whole new group chat, inviting everyone, myself included, except Randy without his knowledge. I know what it feels to be left out. I experienced that in middle school and it's really awful. I stopped hanging out with him and I started hanging out with Randy. He's quite eccentric but a very good person at heart. We've been friends for more than 6 years, and he still got my back. I had this exact experience with my friend group from uni during the pandemic. I graduated 3 years ago and stayed in touch with them, met up every few months, but the pandemic really gave me some time to reflect on my friendship with them and brought some issues I had with how I was sometimes treated to the surface. Once I confronted them, the truth came out that I was being excluded and there was a separate group chat, etc. It was a shitty way to find out, but it confirmed some of how I was feeling about them. The pandemic really brought out the worst in some people, including myself at times, but to have a friend group you'd been invested in for years suddenly turn on you really sucked and pushed me further into social isolation. There were a few guys who had my back and confessed they were sorry and in disagreement to how things were being handled, but it didn't go much further than that. Actions always speak louder than words, and if anyone has a weird anxiety or gut feeling they can't explain after spending time with or interacting with certain friends, pay attention. Dude, the group of friends I gave up on would do this to this guy we know. They'd invite him to hang out only so he could drive us. One time they didn't let him into the club, so I decided to stay behind with him and watch movies at his house. He even had the decency to go back for my friends when the club closed. I'm no longer friends with them, but I am still friends with the guy, and he even helped me get together with my boyfriend. I don't give him enough props, lol. Yes, my best friend in high school used to do this to me all the time. On Wednesday, I'd ask if she wanted to see a movie Friday night. She'd always say maybe, if I can get out of doing whatever with my parents. Come Monday, I'd hear her talking about how great the movie was. Apparently, last minute her parents said she didn't have to go, and miraculously a group of people called right then and asked her to see the same movie. She'd always say, I figured you made other plans, when I confronted her about it. In reality, she'd just wait to see what the better option was and pick on Friday. God, that pissed me off. Yep, this happened to me, but more generally. I had a friend who would only contact me when she needed something, but she was pretty sly about it in the beginning, inviting me over to hang and then bringing up the favor organically, like, oh, we don't have anyone to watch the dog next weekend, or I want to move this bed but it's so heavy, etc. After a while it got more egregious and obvious, only calling to ask to use my truck or dog sit. I'd politely say I wasn't available, and eventually she stopped calling. She still texts every now and then to catch up. She tried that a few times in the past and it was always followed by a request, despite my no longer responding. To this day I cringe when someone says hi friend, her freaking catchphrase. I flew out to support a friend going through a messy divorce. While I was there, she left me in the apartment to meet up with her boyfriend that I didn't know about. He turned out to have just been released from prison for manslaughter. Once she told me that, I told her that I didn't want to spend time with him, especially considering the circumstances of my visit. The next night, I woke up in the middle of the night to find him in the living room. She said that she thought it wouldn't matter since I was asleep. The next day, she invited her soon-to-be ex-husband over without telling me and then asked me to meditate their conversation. Once he got there, that conversation turned ugly fast, and she ended up storming out. He broke down and asked if I thought it was salvageable, and I told him that she had already moved on. Maybe not the best idea on my part, but at that point, she had shown me how vile of a person she is. Apparently I didn't realize I was on a different tier of friendship with my so-called friend. My friend was getting married and I didn't get an invite, which was fine since her wedding was a destination wedding in a different country. I attended a sleepover party, which she hosted. There was about 9 girls there in total. They kept talking about the kick-ass bachelorette party and then started showing photos of the crazy party. I realized I was the only one not invited. Made me feel kind of crummy. I am really sorry you had to go through this. I heard a bunch of rumors about me well after I left my old school, but not from my friends. People who I didn't even know. I kept to myself with the small friend circle. Had all sorts of rumors about me. Someone made a social media account impersonating me and made rude sexual comments towards some female classmates. I was so disappointed. I'd have been distraught if it was from a friend. This was also when I realized who were my friends and who weren't. We were supposed to go to a tour and we saved our money and pooled them. Fake friends told me they had to cancel the plan because ticket prices got too high. Told me to wait a few days to get my money back. Real friends asked me why I bailed on them, and were worried that I had an emergency. Turns out my fake friends didn't want me to come and instead would use my money for their booze and told everyone else that I bailed out and took my money back so everyone else would give more for their booze allowance. That friendship ended and I also learned my fake friends were alcoholics and weren't strangers to fucking over people to get what they want. Today one of them is alive. Their alcoholism ruined their lives and some even died from it. Same thing happened to me. Was friends with so many people during college and the last 3 weeks was an unpaid work placement which we had to go back to the school to hand in our paperwork. Not one of them spoke to me or would even answer me if I said something to them. Became clear that I was only valuable to them when I was helping them. Class awards had me down as most willing to help classmates. Edit, thank you for the award. Edit 2. OMG, thank you all so much for the awards. Never expected this to blow up when I posted. This friend, I'll call her Mary, had kids the same age as mine. We got together for play dates pretty often and our kids would sleep over at each other's houses for weekends. I liked Mary. We would often visit and talk while our kids were playing. One weekend, her kids had stayed at my house. The older one called her mom to see when she was coming to pick her up. I was in the room, and the kid put the phone on speaker for some reason. Mary told the kid what time she would be there and added, "You had better be waiting outside. If I have to go in and spend the next hour talking to revert them, I'm going to be really pissed." We didn't spend much time together after that. Edit, I'm getting a lot of similar questions and comments, so I let an edit here instead of writing the same answer a dozen times. Did I overreact? Was Mary just having a bad day and not want to talk? And, my personal favorite, revert them. Maybe you're just insufferable. Here's what happened after I overheard my friend say that to her child. I simply stopped initiating contact and wasn't as available to do stuff for her. When we dropped off or picked up the kids, I smiled and waved. I let the kids make the plans for play dates. I no longer had time to help her with her garden or watch her kids while she went out with another friend. They were into long-distance running, which is not my cup of tea. She never contacted me unless she wanted something. This had always been true, but I had not realized it. The friendship eventually fizzled out on its own. So, I guess it had never been much of a friendship to begin with. I just didn't realize it until she opened my eyes. This was quite a few years ago. My ex and I were really friendly with another couple, did a ton of stuff together. Then they moved, not far, and fairly shortly after my ex and I separated. They hung out with me for a few months but then stopped calling. A few years later, I ran into both of them at a race, an ultramarathon, and they both pretended like they didn't know me. That was actually a really painful moment. I just posted something similar. When I was married we were in a friend group with 3 other couples on our street. My ex cheated and we divorced. The group kept inviting both of us to the same events because they didn't want to pick sides. I moved out of the neighborhood and realized they were proximity friends, not real friends. That hurt a lot. Same thing happened to me on my 21st birthday. All my friends made up excuses why they couldn't come. Then the 3 friends that did met some guys and we went back to their house and awkwardly sat around. Happened again for my 25th birthday. I had moved across the country and found new friends, but they all bailed at the last minute. I called my roommate at the time who came out when he got off work, and he called some of his friends who came out, and I had the best night ever. Those guys are now my real friends, and I married that roommate. I wouldn't say I have fake friends, but I am definitely the periphery friend. The majority of the time, if there isn't enough tickets or space in the car for everyone to go do something, I'm the one who gets cut out. It doesn't bother me much, but I wish they would be more mindful when talking to me about things we have done. Remember when we went to see 30? Wasn't that fun? Well, no, because I wasn't invited. In those situations it usually gets awkward, or they say, hey, we would have invited you if we had the tickets, space, etc. I also experienced this with the friend group I grew up with. There was no single awful event. Just got tired of being on the periphery and being an afterthought, even though when we were actually together you'd swear we were all family. Finally, decided to just cut it all out and move on after my absolute closest friend, who I've known since I was 8, handed me a wedding invitation for a wedding that was planned for a year, and now it was like 2 weeks away. He tells me hotel is almost fully booked, so call soon if you plan on staying overnight. That was the most I've ever felt like a complete and total afterthought. Went to the wedding for the ceremony and one last show of effort for the friendship, but at this point I felt so uncomfortable and alienated. I knew they just weren't my people anymore and I had to get on without them. I was always on that spectrum as well. I've had 4 core groups of friends over the years. First was in junior high and high school, and I would frequently learn about things they had done or parties they'd had that I wasn't invited to for whatever reason. 2 years after graduation I just wasn't invited to hang out anymore. College I had a new core group, or really 2. But during the summer I was left out when they would all get together and do activities we all did during the school year. I never understood why I was left out. Then after graduating I drifted away, got another group of friends, and same story. I don't blame any of them though. I'm obviously the common denominator and I have my thoughts on what's wrong with me that people don't think to have me around, or perhaps don't want me around, but I'm still trying to really figure it out. Maybe if I fix it I can finally have some long-term friends, but I'm getting older, have kids, and not really hopeful that's going to happen. Shortly realized after quitting cocaine that a majority of my friends only kept me around so they could feel better about their own cocaine habits. I was heavily addicted and setting myself down a path I never once thought I could or would take. Stopped for my own benefit and health, and was treated like a selfish piece of shit for doing so. The next months ensued and not one of them checked in to see how I was doing. But instead my high school best friend started sleeping with my ex-high school girlfriend. I was with her for 5 years and actually thought I was going to marry her at one point. Who dumped me for doing cocaine and is now an honorary member of the group I was cast out of, replaced with the person who partially fueled my substance abuse. Who dumped me for substance abuse, by the group that didn't like me stopping my substance abuse, so they could all abuse substances together. It's now been over a year since I quit, and honestly couldn't be happier. Got rid of a cocaine addiction and about 1,000 pounds of dead weight, but it was an eye-opener to say the least. Something similar happened to me. We were all set to go enjoy music at a local establishment. I talked to multiple people from the group, confirming meeting time. I got there and no one else was there. Eventually they all showed up together. Found out they had been out all day together shopping, drinking, and I was the only one not clued into that part. I had been looking forward to the night but ended up feeling lower than I had ever felt. This is the worst feeling. When I was in my mid-20s, I worked a job where 4 of us had the same position. The 4 of us did everything together. Then I made a mistake, and I apologized for it, but one of them just could not seem to forgive me, and aggressively isolated me from the group. I remember how shitty it was to discover that they had a whole group chat that I wasn't included in. and had done all these social things without me. I've always been lucky to have a lot of friends, and I figured out after a while that these people weren't going to be it for me, so I stepped away from those friendships and invested in my actual friendships. It still makes me mad looking back, though. I was at a party, really depressed after a bad breakup and got drunk. My abusive ex showed up, caught me somewhere alone and hit me. I begged several friends for help since I was too drunk to drive home alone and they ignored me. My ex-best friend was there, completely sober, and refused to drive home with me because she didn't believe he would do that. There's no Uber or anything in my country BTW. The whole thing escalated. One guy I didn't know ended up finding me alone in a field crying and throwing up, brought me back to the house, built a bed out of blankets for me and sat guard all night to make sure my ex wouldn't do anything again. When you try to open up and try to share a genuine conversation about something going on in your life and all they can do is crack jokes and try to get you to go out drinking with them, made me realize how surface level many friendships really are. Then you have the opposite of that. 3 guys I've known since I was a freshman in high school, been friends for over 15 years, have stayed in touch through all of us getting married, having kids, and moving to completely separate areas or the country. Yet whenever we're within an hour of each other we always make a point to get breakfast and catch up. This usually turns into 3+ hour conversations. This may only happen once or twice a year, but I consider those guys my best friends. That's real friendship and I'm fortunate to have them. I'm still best friends with my best friend from 2nd grade. We live on opposite ends of the country now. We make it a point to visit each other once a year, sometimes where we live, sometimes as a random new city. We went to Portland, or last year. Almost 30 years of friendship. We've been there for each other through all the hard times, and I get to be there for his wedding next year. Friendships are easy when you're a kid, but get harder with age. You have shit going on in your life that just makes it harder to hang out with people. But you make time for those who really matter. Oh oof, this one hurt. When I was married we had a friend group of 3 couples from our street. We went to football games, trips to the beach and spent holidays at each other's homes. After the divorce I went traveling for a year, then moved to a condo downtown in our city. I'd had lunch with the wives after returning from traveling. I thought we were still friends. I was sitting on my 2nd floor balcony of my new condo one night about 8 p.m. and saw them walking down the street. I said, "Hi, so good to see you." They'd all been out to dinner and were headed to another couple's apartment who had moved downtown while their house was being renovated for a quick drink. I was excited to see them and asked them to stop by on their way back to where they'd parked. I tidied up my place and anxiously awaited seeing my old pals. I was texting with one of the ladies during the wait. About 9 p.m. I saw them walking and chatting back towards my place. They couldn't see me. When they got close to my balcony they stopped talking and walked quickly and quietly by, then started laughing and talking after they passed. The one I'd been texted with while I waited sent me a text an hour later saying they were just now leaving the other friend's place and it was too late to stop by. I replied that I'd seen them when they left. I never spoke to any of them again even though they tried to be friends on Facebook. I wasn't hurt that they couldn't stop by on short notice. It was that they made me a joke and it really hurt. Doctor, don't expect to stay friends with couples you were friends with when you were part of a couple. When I returned to work after being off for 3 months due to an injury and I practically begged them to go grab a beer and do pub trivia, but all 3 of them passed because they had plans. Well, it turns out their plans were to go grab a beer and do pub trivia without me. Found out through social media. Deleted it shortly afterwards. I've been a lot less depressed about things since I've deleted social media and stopped looking at them as friends and just as work acquaintances. It took that for me to realize that the friendships were really one-sided and I'm better off not pursuing anything other than being cordial at work. I feel your pain. My closest friend of 10 years sent me a text saying I don't do enough for her and she has other friends. She sent that the night before an MRI for my brain tumor. That was 4 years ago and it still stings. Oh, and she lives down the street from me.